Good morning. Thank you for coming this morning. We are like right on time, so I'm going to get started. My name is Chris Pruitt. I'm the Director of Content Ecosystem at Meta. Director of Content Ecosystem is like a super Silicon Valley way to say that my team is basically third-party publishing and third-party developer support. And what we do is we take like pretty much all of the games, not all of them, but the vast majority of games that you can find on Oculus Quest, and we get them to the platform. We manage the developer, we provide funding, we provide technical assistance, we provide long-term account management, all kinds of stuff. My team also operates App Lab. We run Oculus Start, we run Oculus Launchpad. We're basically involved in all kinds of developer work on Quest. Personally, I'm a game developer. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I've had the great opportunity to work on a large number of video games. Ran an indie game studio for a number of years. And my job here at Meta is one that I'm really passionate about because I would like to create the type of platform that I want to ship to, right? Like I want to create a platform that would have been there for me when I was an indie game developer. So usually when I'm here at GDC, traditionally I've been talking about like how to make your frame rate fast, or like how to optimize your VR scene, or what are the best practices in VR about like hand tracking, or what's the new hardware that's coming next year. And today I'm not going to talk about any of those things. Today I'm going to talk about content ecosystems, which is yet another Silicon Valley term. But what we mean when we say a content ecosystem is like a virtuous cycle between producers and consumers. In particular, I want to talk about the Quest store as a virtuous cycle. Like developers make great content, our consumers buy it, and developers get paid. And if we do our jobs properly, that should be a flywheel that spins faster and faster, right? We should be able to produce better and better games for our customers and more money for our devs. And you may have seen that we announced earlier this year that the Quest store has now generated $1 billion in software sales revenue. That's a pretty big number. I think it's actually pretty impressive that we did that like in a little over 2 years. Like Quest launched in 2019, Quest 2 launched in 2020, and you can see like the arc of the graph is like pretty fast. We're actually growing very, very quickly, and we're delivering a huge amount of revenue directly to developers today. And within those segments, there's a lot of hits, right? And the hits are very substantial hits. These are games that are generating revenue that would be very respectable, I think, on any games console platform. But as the director of content ecosystem, I'm interested in more than just the top tier, right? Like the top tier existing and being very, very successful is absolutely a mark of a successful ecosystem. But I also want to think about the folks that are in the middle, right? Like, of course, yeah, sure, there's like a 1% or top 10 or something of people that are making huge amounts of money. But what about the folks at the 10th percentile or the 20th percentile or 30th, 40th percentile? Like, are those folks able to actually sustain their business and grow? And the answer is, at least today, like we're doing a really good job of wealth aggregation, right? We're taking the money that folks are spending in our store, and it's actually being delivered to a large number of developers across a lot of different genres, a lot of different developer sizes and scopes. This is a confusing graph about the number of developers in each sort of revenue category that we've generated so far, and these are exclusive categories, right? They're not overlapping. But the main message of the slide is, look, there's actually a lot of developers making actual material, substantial revenue in VR today, and it's not just the top hits. You can see this in other measurements, right? Like we see folks that are making very good software, great games in VR, but are not the super hots and Beat Sabers of the world, experiencing a lot of growth and a lot of success. What I want to talk to you about today is that we produce this ecosystem intentionally. Right? This was not something that just like grew up organically. It wasn't like serendipity, like, wow, we're lucky. It's not just because we sold a lot of VR headsets. We particularly built our ecosystem specifically to produce this result. And what I want to do is explain like how we got there and what our thinking about it was. But to tell you that, like I have to back up to about 2018 or so, because inside Oculus in 2018, we were having like a super debate about what we should be doing with our VR hardware. And there's kind of two sides to this debate, but to understand them, you have to go back and look at the hardware that was available in market at the time. We had Oculus Go, which was a 3 degrees of freedom, like super accessible, kind of casual VR device. And then we also had Oculus Rift, which was like super high fidelity PC gamer rig device. And both of these were targeted at different audiences, and they were actually pretty successful within the targets that we had sort of set up for them. But they also had flaws too, right? They had problems that were going to prevent them from sort of breaking into a larger market and becoming a more mainstream VR headset. So when we went to design Quest, we understood that we had to sort of like take all the good components out of our existing products and put them together into a new product. And from a hardware perspective, that's pretty easy to understand, right? Like it had to be standalone. It had to be 6 degrees of freedom with tracking. It had to be able to run high-end games. It had to have tracked controllers for your hands that have sticks and buttons and grip triggers and those things. Like from a hardware perspective, it was kind of easy to see where what the elements of a more successful combination product would be. But what was not clear was how we should actually operate the platform, how we should operate our store. Should we be an open platform or should we be closed? And when I say like open or closed, what I mean is should we let any developer who comes to us with any application through the door and put them on our store, or should we have an opinion about what's out there? Should we curate for quality or apply some sort of filter? And we had huge debates about this. This is like a knock-down, drag-out debate for years within Oculus. My personal opinion about how we should do this was informed in no small part by the results we saw from Oculus Go. And Oculus Go has actually had a very vibrant developer community. There's thousands of applications in the store. But a lot of them were like, somebody's weekend Unity VR experiment, or somebody who wanted to like prove out a new locomotion method in VR and they made a demo app to show that, or like a really cool experience that lasted 5 minutes and then was over. Stuff that like the core VR enthusiast community would really enjoy, but the average customer didn't really understand. Like these like shape of an application didn't make sense, quite alien in fact, to a casual person who just got into VR for the first time. And we could see our customers sort of come in and really quickly split into two different categories. Like the folks that came in and they were like would engage with our highest quality software, like the best games that were out there, the best apps. They would get in and they would retain, right? They would continue to use the Go device. They would use it multiple times a day. They'd stick with it. They'd become part, like an active member of the ecosystem. But the folks who came in and they got some like rando test app as their first experience in VR, or they got something that was like rough around the edges, or something that was designed for a very specific niche that they weren't part of, what would happen is they would make an assumption that what they were seeing in that one app was probably representative of the entire rest of the catalog. And then they would churn out and put the headset down and we'd never see them again. And the reason was that VR is just like very new. Like nobody understands, particularly the folks that have never owned a VR headset before, they don't understand what it is that they're getting into when they buy this headset. There's just not a lot of precedent. So expectations are set really, really early. Like in the first week of ownership, we could see that expectations we set, and that would impact the lifetime viability of that person on our platform. So, I had customers come to me and say like, boy, I really wish you had more apps in the Oculus Go store. And I'm like, there's like 3,000 apps in the Oculus Go store. What are you talking about? And what they meant was they couldn't actually find something that they thought was going to be for them. They couldn't find something they thought was going to be valuable. They couldn't really run a value assessment on whether some app that they were going to download was going to be good or bad. And the reason was that because they didn't know what to expect and because their early experience was probably poor. So what I understood for Quest was that we needed to make a really good first impression, right? Like our customers had to come in and they had to get like super blown away by whatever it was that they tried first. And they had to be like, wow, that was amazing. I want to do more of that. And they had to go buy another thing and get blown away again. And for that to be true, we needed our customers to trust us, to say that we'd put a lot of care into not just the product, but also into the content of the store so that their money is protected. When they go to make a purchase, they're not going to get a lemon. They might get something that's not their taste, but it won't be badly made. It'll be high polish and high quality, even if it's not something that they necessarily wanted to engage with. It won't be something that is rough around the edges or difficult to understand or small. So when we asked our customers, like, okay, well, what does quality mean? You want a high quality app, what does that mean? Mostly what they would say is, oh, well, like I play on my consoles. They would say, oh yeah, I want production quality, I want visual quality, I want depth of gameplay, I want length, I want all those things. Just the ways that we sort of evaluate traditional console games. That's the same model that our customers are applying to content in VR. So it was very clear to me that what we needed was console quality video games. So in 2019, I announced that we were going to start curating the Quest store. This is actually prior to Quest launching. This was also quite, there's a lot of debate about this. externally, there's a lot of debate about it, but also internally. There's a lot of folks who thought that this is the wrong way to go. It's like maybe it's too early in VR's life cycle to start, closing the doors. But I felt really strongly about it because a lot of the early, VR software that we have on our platform doesn't look like video games that you played on your Nintendo Switch or something. In fact, a lot of it doesn't have, the IP or the brand value or some, franchise that you could associate with knowing what you're getting into and having that sort of value built into it. And we need customers to come in and take a little bit of risk and try things that they've never tried before. And for that to be true, there has to be like a baseline expectation that whenever they try, it's going to be pretty good. 90% of the people who activate a Quest have never owned an Oculus device before, right? So we are courting a user base that is not just the VR enthusiast user base. It's actually a very mass market general gamer audience. I have to admit that I'm also, my opinion is also informed by my sort of general annoyance with app stores in general. I think the problem with a lot of open platforms is that they're impenetrable, right? Like you can't find anything in them, and there's no value in trying to like go through the catalog yourself or browse. And so you end up with systems that try to use algorithms to promote certain content. And those things work for content that's already got like some velocity to it. Like they can take something that's like already on its path to success and amplify it. Generally, they're not so good at taking something that's like just shipped, for example, or something that is going to target like a very specific niche and finding that user and making a connection. And I think a lot of app stores, you ship into them and you're kind of shipping into a black hole. Either you have a way to connect to your audience yourself, or you're going to fail because there is no tools, there's no way for you to actually go out and find the audience that built into the store itself, right? And that leads to a situation where you have a very small number of winners and a very large number of losers in the ecosystem. And I know some of you are probably sitting in the audience thinking like, well, I mean, like, duh, welcome to business. That's always true. That's how it works, Chris. And like, I understand what you mean, but you're actually not right. Like, if you look at entertainment platforms, like other types of entertainment media platforms, there's all kinds of examples of platforms that do a much better job of making sure that a much larger swath of creators in those ecosystems are profitable without, getting rid of the super mega hits, right? And I think that the way that app stores function is mostly the result of the design of those stores. And if that's true, then we should be able to design something that's better. So the approach we took was curation. And for curation to be successful, I think that there's a couple of like really important rules you got to stick to. First of all, you need the folks that are actually doing the curating, the folks that are actually going to like decide what people get to see in VR versus what they don't get to see. Those folks have to come from like a really diverse set of backgrounds. We need folks with different opinions, different backgrounds, different experience, because otherwise you're going to end up with a lopsided result. You're not going to end up with a catalog that is actually interesting to your audience. We have to goal on developer success, right? Like my team in particular has to make the success of the developers we work with the top line goal for our team. If devs are not getting paid, if devs are not able to grow their business, then my job is failing and our product is not going to survive. I will take quality over quantity every day of the week. I think a handful of really good games is worth more than 1,000 mediocre games to our customers. And I also think niche content is critical. When you say like high quality content, I don't actually mean mainstream games, because the trick is that like everybody has a niche. Like everybody's a nerd about something. Personally, for me, it's horror games. If you want to like, I've played hundreds of them. If you want to like talk about horror games, I have several hours available for you. But everybody has something. Everybody is a nerd about something. And when you look at niche games, you might think, oh, well, the audience for this is kind of narrow. And that might be true, but that if you have a bunch of niches, you're actually creating a mass market mainstream platform. And I think every title should have a chance, right? Like I can't guarantee that every title that ships on our platform is going to be a success. Every platform is going to have hits and misses, but at least every app should have a chance. I don't want to be selling lottery tickets. I'll tell you, curation is really hard. Like as a strategy, it sounds good on paper, but actually implementing it's really difficult because it means saying no, and saying no is really hard, right? And like sometimes we have to say no to developers who have like amazing pedigree, and they've done great work, and we know they can do great work. Sometimes we say no, and we get dragged in social media about it because it's not a popular decision. Sometimes we say no, and we like make a mistake, and we reject something we should have taken. It's hard. It's really hard to do, but it works as an ecosystem building strategy. It's very effective. We've shipped over 400 titles to date on Quest Store, and that's about somewhere around a little bit more than 100 per year. And And 120 of those titles have made $1 million of revenue or more. I think that ratio is very difficult to find in other markets, even within App Store markets. 60% of the titles that we've shipped are video games, but the vast majority of the total revenue, that $1 billion I talked about, the vast majority of that comes from games. We're seeing devs come back and make their second or third title, which is a really strong indication that we are making that sort of economic loop work. We're also doing funding for games. Our funding deals don't look like traditional publisher deals. Generally, what we're trying to do is take something that's already in development and accelerate it or make it higher quality. Our goal is to raise the aggregate level of quality of software on our platform all the time. But you don't need funding from us to be successful on the platform. In fact, many of the biggest successes didn't receive any funding from us. So one of the ways we measure whether or not this strategy is working is to look at the revenue. And the revenue is big and it's growing pretty quickly, so cool. That half of the circle is working. The other way we look at it is whether or not product quality is going up. And I think if you look at the games that we're shipping this year or the games we shipped late last year, compare them to the things that we shipped in 2019, there's a really big difference in the level of product quality. And that indicates that not only are developers making money, they're actually making larger investments in their subsequent software. And we are actively growing the pie. So I think that's actually a pretty good measure of success. I want to talk for just a bit about who our audience actually is. We do this segmentation survey. It's we go out to a bunch of people who are particularly gamers in the United States and ask them a bunch of survey questions how much money do you spend on video games every year? And what kind of games do you like? And do you consider yourself a gamer? And would you be interested in buying a VR headset? And from that data, we compiled this big research report, kind of grouped all these people up into little gamer categories and then gave them cute names. And this is just a subset of the findings that came out of one of our studies. It's all available online, and it's super interesting. So I don't know if you can see the link down there. But this research is super informative of our strategy because it helps us understand who is buying our headsets. And I think if you look at it, it's pretty straightforward. If you've worked in the game industry for a while, you're going to identify those top two groups as a core gamer segment. And that bottom group, the time passers, that's kind of your mobile gamer segment. They're folks who don't identify as gamers, but they spend a lot of time playing games. They're probably not going to buy a VR device anytime soon. I would like to draw your attention to the story seekers, though. This is a really interesting group that I wasn't really aware of until we did this research. And this is a group that is defined by their interest in narrative. The reason they play video games is because they want stories. And that might mean Skyrim, it might mean Gone Home. There's not a lot of genre definition in there. It's just, I want to consume a narrative when I'm playing a video game. What's interesting about them is they're the single largest segment we identified. There's almost 30 million people in this category in the United States. And they're the most gender balanced. 53% of these folks are women. These are not early adopters. These are not the folks that line up at Best Buy, midnight before new hardware drops. They come in a year or 2 or 3 years into a hardware cycle. And the reason that they don't show up right away is that they're waiting for evidence that a new platform can actually support the types of story games that they're interested in. So we have a bunch of these folks on our platform today, but we actually think there's this huge group of them just waiting in the wings to adopt VR devices in the next 2 or 3 years. So we've seen a lot of investment in narrative-focused games. And the good news is VR is great at telling stories in 3D space. And our core audience, definitely can't ignore those folks either. These folks are on the platform today. There's a whole lot more of them coming. One of the things I wanted to point out about these guys is that they really like multiplayer. Whether that's a social game or it's co-op or competitive, any kind of multiplayer, real-time, synchronous game in VR does really well with these folks, and they spend a lot of money. So that's another area that we're seeing a lot of growth in. I want to spend just a minute to talk about which business models are working today. The short version is if you want to make money in VR, you should make a paid game. Probably the price is going to cost about what it would cost on any other console. The quality expectations and price track pretty closely to consoles. DLC works the way it would work on a console. Works for some games, not for others. Free-to-play, we don't have a ton of evidence about yet. We have a couple of success stories in free-to-play. I would say that they look more like PC-style free-to-play, meaning that they're multiplayer games where mostly what you're buying is either battle passes or cosmetic items in order to identify yourself as an individual in a multiplayer experience, rather than the sort of loops and systems we see in mobile free-to-play. We don't really have any evidence that mobile free-to-play is going to work in VR. Subscriptions are also really new. We just launched support for subscriptions last year. They clearly are going to work for fitness applications and also for social games. And we think they'll work for MMOs and other sort of servicey game formats, but it's new enough that we don't have a lot of data to hang that assumption on yet. I will say that we do know customer expectations going up, right? As our audience expands, as we get to a yet larger, more mainstream audience, those folks are coming in with expectations that were set by consoles, and they expect to play console-style games in VR, and that means like the bar is continually moving up, particularly for production quality, depth, and length, and those things. But I will say, as successful as our strategy has been to build an ecosystem, we lost something in the process. And one of the things we lost was that sort of like early, experimental, super enthusiast focus sort of community of folks building VR applications that we had a lot of in the Rift and Go days, and it's just not like been a great spot for them in our curation strategy. So we have programs like Oculus Start and Launchpad, which are essentially incubation programs, and they're designed to like find developers that are right at their like inflection point of their careers and try to level them up by giving them access to some resources. And that has been one of the ways we've tried to maintain a community around sort of high enthusiasm apps. We also saw that our customers were interested in sort of bleeding edge experimental stuff because they got together and created things like SideQuest, which is like an off-platform app store that was, has turned into a really vibrant developer community. So last year we announced a new distribution platform called AppLab. AppLab is a non-curated distribution platform that sits on top of Quest. These titles are not in our store, so you can't find them on the platform, but you can upload a title and then you get a link and you can send that link to your community, and after that it sort of works the way that any other app on the platform would work. There's no curation or editorial applied, just some sort of technical and policy checks that you have to hit. We did this in part because we realized that a lot of the developers that are in these enthusiast communities are actually very well linked up with those communities. They have like great channels into their audience already, much better direct channels than we have. And so if we can give them access to distribution via a link, they can actually go back to their communities, whether it's SideQuest or something else, and get a very high intent audience to come look at their title. We have multiple success stories here. Like there are apps on AppLab today that have generated over $1 million in revenue without any sort of promotional support from us or our store. The other output of AppLab is that it actually has to create communities like this, right? For developers who are entirely in charge of the discovery of their application to be successful, they have to go out and find those high intent users and create a community for them. And the high intent users have to like come in and be part of that community. And the output of this system is actually growth of that super interesting, super high intent community. And that's one of the side effects of this system that has really been valuable for us. AppLab has been super duper successful. Like we're fairly overwhelmed with the amount of interest in AppLab. We've shipped over 1,400 titles in the last year. It takes right now about 21 days to get through the queue. That's like from first submission to actually shipping. And usually that's because like your app will probably get kicked back an average of 1.6 times because we ask you to make some change or you forgot to check a box or you update your privacy policy or whatever it is. But the queue lengths, they change and ebb and flow, and sometimes we're under more weight, and sometimes we do a little bit better. This is an area where we've had a huge amount of interest, and we're frankly working as hard as we can to keep up with the demand. I want to talk just for a moment before I close this out about Horizon Worlds as the third spoke in our sort of developer ecosystem conversation. Horizon Worlds is a virtual world product. We announced it a couple years ago. Came out of beta late last year. It's available in the United States and Canada. And if you've been in the game industry long enough, you probably have worked on a virtual world product. This is my second one personally, but Horizon is unique of all of the ones that I've seen in that it's a collaborative development environment. Like you're actually in VR, you're in the space, and you're building your spaces with other people, and not just the geometry, but also like the code and hooking everything up in virtual space, and then inviting folks to come and hang out there with you. We want to accelerate the speed and the quality of the worlds that we're putting into Horizon Worlds. And for that, we need to attract a bunch of world builders to come work in our community. And we also selfishly would like to get feedback from the folks who know what they're doing in virtual world creation about like where we should take this product. Like this is definitely a work in progress, and we need feedback to inform our roadmap. So what we're doing is, as of this morning, we're taking our existing Oculus Start and Launchpad programs, and we're building in new tracks specifically for folks who want to build worlds in Horizon Worlds. And this is a way to get into VR and to express yourself at a much lower cost than building an application. We announced last year that we've allocated like $10 million to support the creation of virtual worlds. A big chunk of that money is going to go directly into these Oculus Start programs to fund the development of new worlds and the creation of new community around Horizon Builders. If you're interested in this, here's the link. I'll put a link on the last slide as well if you miss it here. But this is new. We just announced this piece of it this morning. We'd love to have you as part of the community. So to finish up, we're trying to produce a system that is going to be viable for all different types of developers. You know, if you're a pro, whether that means you're like a professional indie, or you are a skilled studio, or you're a traditional publisher, and you can make high-end, high-quality console-grade stuff, boy, we would love to have you on the Quest store. If you are pushing the boundaries of what VR can do, you're building something you want to build for your specific community, you're trying to get something out there just to get feedback or maybe make some money, App Lab is the fastest and easiest way to get onto our platform. And if you're interested in building Horizon or sort of virtual worlds with us, we'd love to have you come be part of the Horizon Builder community. So with 5 minutes left, I'm going to stop there and go to Q&A. I will say the last PSA here is we're hiring like crazy. My team's growing quite a lot. All kinds of roles to hire from. Any of the stuff we talked about today sounds like something you might want to be involved with. Please go look on our website for these roles and please apply. And with that, I will take questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time and energy to give us this talk. My name is Jackie. My pronouns are they, them. I'm an active Horizon World builder. I was a beta user, still in there, going strong.
Awesome.
And with the tools in Horizon Worlds, I see it as a way to decentralize the community of building games. And as a non-binary individual, I see these statistics and they're awesome, but I see male and female. I don't see anything about other types of genders, and I see that as the top target audience, right? And if we're distributing these Horizon World tools to builders, I'm really curious to know what you're doing from that perspective to give those tools out a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't want to speak for the Horizon team about their plans, but that's exactly the type of feedback that we need to help us build the roadmap. So like what I would ask you is if you're interested in the Horizon Builder Start community, we'd love to have you involved, particularly as somebody who's been building it for a while. But what we're selfishly asking for is not just like you to come build cool worlds with us, but to give us that sort of feedback. Because we're building these things in a little bit of a Silicon Valley bubble, and it's really, really important that the folks that are actually the builders have a voice in the creation of the product. So like I actually don't know the answer to your question, but I would ask you to come and like deliver the feedback to us so that we could actually get that into the product teams.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm on a 3rd round interview for Horizon World support.
Okay,
so
good luck.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, very good presentation. Thank you so much. I used to ship products for Oculus Go, and then I moved to one of the big studios, so I'm very familiar with the situation. There is an elephant in the room. I'm going to bring it up, if you don't mind, which is Oculus takes 30% of revenue. That's industry standard. But for App Lab, like minor studios or indie developers don't get the same discovery features. Maybe it hurts the revenue model that they have. How does one go to working on App Lab to actually ship on a main store? Because as you know, when you go through the product review and you get your product canceled or not approved, it's not really clear on why it's not on the quality level of major studios. Yeah, which I'm working on. But so what is the intent right now?
The way that we've approached App Lab is that we don't want to differentiate on policy between App Lab and the store. And in fact, one of the things that App Lab is great at is identifying successful applications or high quality games that we wouldn't have otherwise known about. And there have been a number of sort of graduates that have come out of App Lab and moved into the store. Although that's not the purpose of App Lab, right? Like App Lab's designed to be self-sustaining on its own. Like you should be able to build your business just in App Lab. But for that to be possible, for us to be able to take sort of apps from one surface and put them in the other, it's really important that we apply like the same policies. So we have a little bit of differentiation in like the VRCs. We're a little bit more relaxed on the technical requirements for App Lab, but otherwise we apply like the same requirements across both platforms, and that's the reason that they are the same.
Thanks, Chris. In the beginning, you referred to the fact that console quality was a main reason why you guys curate the way that you curate. And as you're saying that, I wanted to kind of look at another benchmark. One thing that I've seen Sony do over the past few years really, really well is that they have a first-tier set of partners who they collaborate with. That's the reason their narrative games are as great as they are. And I speak for myself. I run an indie studio of about 25 developers. Very often we have a shoot on as many platforms as you can approach. You showed Horizon Worlds. Is there a way for a studio that basically wants to, want to earn enough money to make the money back on your title? Is there a way for us to build something for Oculus? And are there any incentives in your programs that would allow us to build something and deploy it and build something that's franchise related on the Horizon Worlds?
Stay tuned. Absolutely something we're thinking about.
Okay, because that would entice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Makes total sense. I will take one last question. I'm technically out of time, and we have the next group is about to come in here. I also want to say that we're trying to bribe you to get feedback about this talk with a Starbucks gift card. I also actually really appreciate your feedback. So please go in and leave feedback if you have it. Thanks for coming today. What's the last question?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for the talk. Try to make it quick. You mentioned that there are some developers who have published on App Lab and have kind of graduated to the main store. Is there a clear path for people who are on App Lab or developers who are on App Lab to getting that graduation, or is it kind of just you guys still feel it out?
No, there's no if you check the following 5 boxes, then we take you. That's not how it works at all. The systems that we have for putting any content in the store from any location, whether it's coming from App Lab or Steam or any other location, is that we have a committee that looks at games and tries to assess whether it's likely to be significantly successful on the platform or not. Like, we don't want to make, like, when we ask developers to go to our store, we also make technical requirements of them. We send them through a lot of QA, for example. We don't want to do that. We don't want to incur a bunch of cost on the developer side if we don't think we're also going to inflect their success and actually raise the sort of median bar of quality on the platform.
Okay.
So we've taken titles on App Lab that have shipped the week before, that have no evidence of success, right? Because we looked at it and we're like, oh my gosh, this is totally a fit. And there's other titles that have continued to do very well in App Lab, which we have chosen not to take. And that's because we don't need to. Like, they're successful as they are, and putting them in the store will not change their success trajectory. So it's really not the case that you have to fit some checkbox. It's much more the case that App Lab is designed to be standalone and successful as it is. And there might be occasionally cases where we see oh, you know what, actually, this looks like something we could juice if we put it into our store platform. But it's not it's not a set of checkboxes.
Okay. Should developers ask whoever they have a relation with in Oculus about consideration for the main store?
Yeah, you could definitely ask. Yeah.
Or are you guys also all looking all the time?
We are also all looking all the time. That's also true. If we're part of Oculus Start, for example, and you talk to the folks who operate Oculus Start, who are here in the room today, hi Rita. These folks have their finger on the pulse of everything that's in there and have a really good idea of what you're building. It never hurts to remind them or remind us.
Gotcha.
But we are always looking at everything all the time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for coming today. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.